Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our program, Burlington and Beyond. Tonight, we're going to go beyond Burlington to the border of the state of Massachusetts. Our special guest tonight is Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai. Dr. Shiva, I appreciate you being here tonight.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And as a special bonus tonight, we're also being broadcast live on Periscope.
Right there.
And so if you have questions that come up that you'd like to pose to Dr. Shiva, we're looking to get those questions. On my left is Pat Marino, co-host for tonight. And together we should be getting a lot of good information you don't hear too often because it's not mainstream media, it's not the story that's typically being told to us that we're supposed to believe in. We're getting a lot of other opinions tonight, and that's what I look forward to. I look forward to a candidate like Dr. Shiva. I look forward to this type of candidate for my entire career in politics, and I think we finally have one. Doctor, I was hoping we could also get a little bit into the topic of racism.
Mm-hmm. I think it's one of the most important topics.
I do, and then I would also toward the end of the program, like to get into healthcare. Mm-hmm. I have some specific questions as far as how we reduce costs. And I think those would be the two major issues on top of the corruption, which I'm sure we'll be touching on tonight. But Pat, do you want to ask Dr. Shiva a little bit about his past and why he's running?
Exactly what I wanted to do is just give us, we don't have a lot of time. Unfortunately, it goes by so quickly. A thumbnail sketch of your past, where you've been, and how you came to be who you are today.
Thanks, Pat. By the way, thanks for having me on here. We live in an era where journalism is essentially dead, and people essentially don't cover news. They basically create nonsense, and they don't give legitimate people an opportunity to have a vehicle. So I appreciate what you guys are doing here. I think it's important news. You guys are doing journalism. I and probably a lot of people watching this show represent the spirit of America, and that's what I embody. I went through three major phases through the process of immigration, education, and I say innovation. I came from India. India is a caste system, which means that your future is determined not by what you do, but what family you're born into. If you're a janitor, you're supposed to be a janitor. If you're a member of the priesthood, you're supposed to be a priest. That's how it's organized. It's not based on your effort or hard work. That's changing in India, but albeit that was a system that was reimposed by British colonialism. But we were considered untouchables in that caste system. So the fact my parents even came here was quite significant. And when my parents came here in 1970, it was a time when the Vietnam War was going on. You had sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So the fact that it's a very interesting dynamic, right? My parents, in this very humble beginnings, leave India in this almost little spaceship, and they settle down in Paterson, New Jersey. And I went through the public school systems, Paterson, Clifton.
And you were how old at the time?
I was 7 years old, literally left India on my 7th birthday, December 2nd. And so my journey, was in an America where I mowed lawns. My high school, kindergarten teacher, not kindergarten, second grade, elementary school teachers are just these amazing working class people, worked 2 or 3 jobs. So I grew up in India where my grandparents were poor farmers, and I came to America where I saw everyday working people struggling. And that's the milieu in which I grew up. By the time I was 14, I worked very hard. Not only was I good in sports, but also in academics. And I finished calculus, ended up getting accepted to a special program at NYU, New York University, finished top of the class, and then started working full-time while going to high school at a small university called University of Medicine Dentistry in New Jersey, in Newark, which is now known as Rutgers Medical School. And there I invented the world's first email system. Went to MIT, in and out of there, 4 degrees, including my PhD, started 7 companies, creating lots of jobs in Massachusetts. So that's my journey, immigration, education, innovation. But the heart of that journey, and if you look at Massachusetts, which is fundamentally a state of working people, innovators, scientists, educators, that's what I embody. And the sign on the Massachusetts license plate says Spirit of America. Mm-hmm. And I believe I embody that. And I don't believe these other career politicians embody that. I believe what they embody is corruption. We have one of the worst infrastructures in the entire country. We have 3 times the national opioid average, addiction. And we were rated as, I think, an F- or D+ in public integrity.
Oh my goodness.
That's Massachusetts. And that's what the swamp, Republicans and Democrats, have bought people. And if you look at the founders of this country, they were like me in many ways. Innovators, technologists, blacksmiths. They worked for a living. They weren't these, these top of the septic tank politicians. And that's what we've created. And they've created an engine with collusion with the media on how they present themselves. And truth essentially gets is roadkill in that. And I think we have a big opportunity to change that. Our campaign is what's made this election interesting. It was a foregone conclusion Elizabeth Warren was going to win, and we've completely turned the apple cart. We call her Running Scared now. That's her new name. So that's what we call her, Running Scared.
A little squaw.
Fake Indian, racist Elizabeth Warren.
Well, as conservatives, Pat and I, even living in this town, it used to be you could debate the issues. But nowadays, people don't seem to be interested in debating the issues. They would just simply want to call you a racist, a bigot, a sexist, misogynist, homophobe, xenophobe, whatever is out there. You're that. We're that. That's what they call us, instead of actually having a debate of the issues. Are you noticing that same trend towards just name calling as opposed to having an honest discussion on the issues?
Yeah, I think what's happened is, look, the last great conservative Republican was Lincoln, in many ways. John Kennedy, I would put into that realm too.
Yes.
Kennedy was a very statesman-like individual. Both of them were shot, which is an interesting symbolic thing to recognize. But both those individuals, particularly in the last century, Kennedy was really exposing the deep state, and he was going very deep at it. But we don't have Republicans or conservatives in Massachusetts. We have one party called the Democratic Party, and it's represented in 2 realms, 2 faces of it. So when people actually hear logic, when they hear rational thinking, on both sides, they've been so brainwashed into this programmatic view of what is healthcare, what is health, right? Health means you're supposed to take pharmaceuticals. What is racism? You go down the issues. It's not a thoughtful discourse. And what's ironic is the people who have promoted that lack of discourse are the academic institutions. Because the academic institutions are not made of people who are intellectuals. Most of them are average intellect. I'm even talking about universities like Harvard. Particularly the liberal arts universities, at least in the vocational, technical, high tech like MIT or the Voc-Tech, there's a subjective criteria. You have to actually know how to solve a Laplace transform, right? You have to know how to solve a differential equation. You have to know what a Thevenin equivalent is, right? You have to know these facts. In the liberal arts, you write an essay, which could have, it's all subjective.
Right.
So we've created a realm of a set of academics who have defined healthcare. Elizabeth Warren thinks she can write about bankruptcy law, and when the recent paper that she wrote in 2005 and 9 has been proved to be completely a fraud. She thinks there's 10 or 12 people at Harvard who think they define racism. And when a guy like me calls out what racism is, people want to punch a megaphone in my face, right? When a guy like me goes to the free speech rally, 40 of us show up against 40,000 people who've been enraged by Charlie Baker, Marty Walsh, to say that I'm a Nazi. People show up. This is what's called dangerous. And that's a direct failing of the academic elite. In India, we used to call them the Brahmin priesthood. And that's what we have. We have a caste system in America. It's not a class system, we have a caste system. It's a caste system. The class system, at least, you work and you make money and you profit. It's like, but what we have is a caste system, a set of people who do not really produce anything, be it even profit, but they control. Their number one goal is to control narratives. What has Elizabeth Warren produced? What has really Charlie Baker produced? One must question how he even got into Harvard. The latest stuff shows that 30 to 35% of the admissions into Harvard are legacy admissions. And what we can go into, but I think I have a unique advantage because you're looking at someone who's grown on both sides. I'm an insider into the academic elite. I know all their weaknesses. And I know that they do not want to take this country in the right direction, for that matter, the world. They want, they have 2 sets of laws. One law for themselves and another law for, for themselves. For themselves, and a different law for us.
Right. But it's so big.
But there's a solution, though.
And the go ahead. That's what I was getting at.
Look, here's the solution, right? In any engineering problem, in any problem that we solve in any relationships, in a personnel situation, in companies, by the way, which people who work for a living have to do. Politicians don't. Lawyer lobbyists get paid by how many hours they book. Their entire incentive model is not to solve a problem. But if you're an engineer, you're a plumber, you're an electrician, you work for a living, you don't get paid until you solve a problem. Most people, you have customers. So when you're solving a problem, there's two ways to solve a problem. You find the symptom and you put a Band-Aid on it, or you go to the root cause. You know, every company I've run, and I've run a lot of engineering science companies, if there's ever a customer issue, we always have our people say, what is the root cause? And then you go solve the root cause, otherwise you're going to have pissed off customers. So if you look at the current situation, the root cause of this problem that we have, if you go to the root of the root, is we have what's called a deep state. And that deep state is the collusion of the military, industrial, academic complex. And this is not, conspiracy, this is just a fact. And by the way, the longitude and latitude of that deep state is Harvard University, which is the epicenter of it. It's not, there's no theory here. There's an actual location of it. President Eisenhower talked about it. He waited until he got out of office, and then Senator Fulbright talked about it. So
Cambridge is the epicenter.
Cambridge is the epicenter, and Harvard is the epicenter of it's the alpha and the omega of the deep state.
Yeah.
And that people have to acknowledge. Here is a university which was going bankrupt in the 1640s.
Right.
And how did they get out of bankruptcy? They went to a bunch of Christian missionaries and said, we're going to build a thing called an Indian college, and we're going to educate Native American Indians. Give us money. Bail us out.
Okay.
They got the money. They were going to supposedly graduate thousands of these heathens, right? And they only graduated 4 Indians. Then they put their printing press in that building, and then they educate a lot of white students. So Harvard has a history of lying, cheating, and bamboozling people. I would argue that if you look at any major economic collapse, any major war, any major poverty cycle, you can trace it back to an expert at Harvard University. For far too long, we have respected these so-called elitist intellectuals, and they have compelled us to bow down to them. They don't deserve that. That's why we call Elizabeth Warren a racist. That's why we call Elizabeth Warren a fake Indian. We want to break this level of undeserved respect that they've gotten.
Yeah.
And so we need to go back to the fact that people who deserve respect are the American workers. Those are the people who get up and they work, they take care of their families. Because on both sides of the American worker now, you have a set of leeches up here, like the academic elites and people who move money around, called hedge fund managers. And these people are the same people who proselytize people on the other extreme to tell them to collect welfare, who tell them illegal immigration's okay, who support gangs and the gang stuff should be solved like that.
The working poor are caught in the middle.
The working poor, everyday people who are listening right here, we're caught in the middle, right? We're told to accept attacks on free speech, attacks on the Second Amendment, because so let's say the proverbial something happens, the shoe hits the fan, okay?
Yep.
These people will be unleashed on working people.
Right.
Right? Because police are pretty smart. Police are part of the communities. They will actually come to our defense, in my view. And so they've created a very nice model of suffocating the working people at all levels. But the solution here is to recognize who the real problem is. It's the academic elites. It is those people who do not produce value. And the way to solve that is we need to start handcuffing them. Term limits, number one.
Yes.
That's how you handcuff them. You have to have serious campaign finance reform. Number two, when it comes, so that we call our clean government model. Number two, we need to really focus on health. If you're not feeding people the right foods, if we're poisoning our people, you can't think. Look, in India in the 1960s, they said people of my background were stupid. They couldn't be educated. There was a civil rights leader at the time. He said, you know what? You don't feed our people enough food, enough protein. So he demanded, high protein diets, and literally in a generation, you see these people flowering. So we know food affects chemistry, chemistry affects behavior, behavior affects, we poison our people by supporting companies like Monsanto, which, by the way, Elizabeth Warren voted for.
Yes.
She didn't vote for she didn't want Bernie's GMO labeling bill. Prevention, eating healthy foods is the way 80% of Americans want organic food. We have a shortage of organic food. We have a shortage of the number of farmers. We need locally grown food. We don't need big ag. We need to go back to basic fundamentals. And the third part of our program is not only real health, clean government, but we also need real jobs, and I'll talk about that after I take a drink of water.
And if I could just get back to the comparison of the caste system in India, what would be the caste system in this country that would be comparable?
I think the caste system, I'm getting over a cold, so you gotta.
Sure. In the meantime, we're waiting from some Periscope viewers. Please enter your questions. We'd love to pose them to the doctor.
There's about 20 people watching.
You have any questions, Frank?
None yet.
Okay.
So if you go back to the caste system, we talked about there's the intellect, the elite, and what would the other castes be? What would be the other classes?
Yeah, so the Indian system, by the way, if anyone has a cough drop or anything, it'd be great. Someone can get one. But in the Indian system, what you had was it's multiple castes. It was originally based on a guild system, right? Which was the concept that you had certain skills, the old feudal guild system model. Over time, that caste system was not based on the guild system. It became instantiated into, if you were a farmer, you were supposed to be a farmer. Not that, I'm going to just...
They're actually Jolly Ranchers. I think.
Oh, okay, they'll do it. Thank you. Jolly Ranchers. So what you had was a system which was originally intended, to have a very functioning society at what was called a guild system. And over time, it became fossilized into a system where if you were a farmer, you must be a farmer. If you were a janitor, you had to be a janitor. And it was a way of control. Somewhere around the 8th century in India, there was a movement like the Protestant Reformation movement called the Bhakti movement. Bhakti meant devotion to a higher being. And the leaders of that movement asked a fundamental question: if there's equality in heaven, and this is getting, why isn't there equality on earth?
Equality on
because
earth?
because the goal was, many of the great spiritual teachers said we must also make earth, back into the Garden of Eden.
It's called the Bhakti system.
Bhakti, B-H-A-K-T-I. Bhakti meant devotion. So starting around in the 8th century, all the way to the 15th century, you had major poets, major artists, and the rise of the merchant class, which was, by the way, incidentally occurring all over Europe. So by the 15th century, 16th century, that's why if you think about Vasco da Gama coming to India, right?
Yes.
The East India Company, the French, all these guys are coming to India because there's the growth of the mercantile system within India. And so trading starts taking place within India. And you have the rise of the merchant class. The British getting very greedy. And by the way, you had the decline of the feudal lords, right? All the kings were all dying off. They were crossbreeding among each other. They were becoming a weak species. So the rise of the merchant class was taking place. And what the British decided to do was they said, why are we trading with these middlemen? Why don't we put back the feudal lords? And they went from a trading organization to becoming an occupying organization. That's what happened in 1657 at the Battle of Plassey. And instead of imposing British law in India, which they knew would be revolt, guess what they did? They got the priesthood to reinstantiate pre-8th century Indian law.
Oh.
Okay? Because they knew Indians would be easier to accept Indian law. So they actually reimposed the ancient draconian caste system. A lot of Indians don't know this. I was fortunate when I came to MIT in '81 to study with Noam Chomsky because I was very interested to understand this. So I studied every piece of work I could find on this. And what it reveals is that the British colonialism put back this very draconian model of the caste system, which had basically was going away.
Chomsky is known as a renegade.
Chomsky is Chomsky.
Radical.
The thing with Noam is, I traded emails with him yesterday, a couple of days ago, because he's in Arizona now.
Does he still teach? Where?
No, he's in Arizona now.
Oh.
I wasn't able to connect with him, but Noam took an approach. You could call him a far left radical, but he's eviscerated neoliberalism. In 2009, when I met with him after I came back from India, on a small, brief time where I went to India on a Fulbright, and I exposed corruption. The Indian government had to leave. It's a whole journey there. Noam said, if you want to know what's going on in America right now, go watch Rush Limbaugh. That's Noam Chomsky in 2009 telling me to go watch Rush
Of
Limbaugh.
all people.
Exactly, because what he was saying was that the elite on the East Coast and the West Coast had completely forgotten what was going on with everyday working people. And they were talking about, yes, abortion is an interesting issue. Yes, transgender is an issue, right? But these aren't issues that everyday American people are concerned about.
Right.
You know, the working people of this country were talking about healthcare, jobs, etc. And those issues were not being addressed. And people like Rush Limbaugh were addressing those issues.
Yes.
And the elites on the East and West Coast, liberals, were calling them rednecks, etc. So Noam and I had this interesting discussion, and we predicted someone like Donald Trump would come in to fill that void. Someone would address the issues of the poor working class whites, and that's what Trump did, effectively, which needed to be done, by the way.
You are, I mean, you have insight in so many different areas in terms of medicine, government, philosophy, technology, just about everything. How can you as an individual, even if you are elected, and I agree with you with term limits, but how can you affect any change, especially, just take the Massachusetts delegation, for example. What can you, or what kinds of things can you do? Talk about them, try to convince other delegates that are other senators or whoever you happen to be with that this is the right way, this is how we should look at. Even with term limits, the thing I think of is that if you win, and I will vote for you, and I hope you win. What can you do?
So here's the deal. Let's look at where we are in history. See, I'm a big student of history, and I'm a big student of systems theory. Okay, what systems theory? Simply put, if you take, everyone knows ice, water, and vapor, right? You take an ice cube, it melts at a certain point. You get water at another point. If you boil water at the right temperature, suddenly at a certain point at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, it becomes vapor, right? Those are called system changes. It's a significant system when we go from solid to liquid, liquid to vapor, and actually you can go to plasma. But the point here is those are big system changes. When the Renaissance took place, that was a major system change, right? It was a period of the Enlightenment. And that occurred not in some beautiful, heavenly, it was plagues were going on, chaos was going on. But that was, and the founding fathers of this country were children of the Enlightenment. Look, everyone should just go look at Franklin's biography. I mean, this guy did everything.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a movement unto himself.
Yes,
so
he
was
was.
Jefferson.
Yeah.
I mean, you read the writings of Thomas Paine. These are the kinds of people, and they were working people, they were scientists, they were thinkers. Those are the kind of people that we all deserve to be in government. We don't deserve these very scummy politicians. This is a new, very weird job, right? Saying I'm a politician. What is that? It's saying I'm a leech. So no, really, what is that? I don't even understand what that is. So when people say, give me your political... So this is something that's very un-American. The America that my parents came to was where you worked hard. It was based on meritocracy. It was based on creating things, doing things, whether you were a plumber, whether you were an engineer, whether you were a teacher, you were dedicated, committed to your customers, your students, etc. What we've created is a bunch of really scummy people.
The original patriots didn't even want to serve. They wanted 1 year, and they wanted to go back to their farms,
and they were
work.
willing to risk their lives.
Yeah.
For some, these were true human beings, and they were enlightened people.
Yeah.
You know, when I went with those 40 other people on the Parkman Bandstand on August 19th, I didn't see any politician there supporting us. It was 40 of us, like Braveheart, against 40,000 people. Charlie Baker, one of these scummy politicians, plus Marty Walsh, had told the press to stay away.
Yeah,
They were out there with Antifa,
Yep.
supporting them. I mean, this is un-American who these people are.
Exactly.
And we could have been killed. The police could have been killed.
Yeah.
It was the Boston police and us standing against a bunch of brainwashed people. And so when you look at the founders of this country, these people were amazing human beings at a time when the Renaissance was taking place. So what I'm trying to say is I believe we live in an extraordinary time. Donald Trump's election in 2016 was like a bomb went off. It was
Yes.
like the first shot fired. And I want to be the next wave of that. Massachusetts was where the revolution took place. If Trump's election was like Lexington, I want to make our election, like the Bunker Hill, what occurred after that, right? It was the beginning of a battle. So it's not an individual, but you need inspiration, right? When we stood in front of 40 people and people eventually saw the video, they go, oh my God, the complete media lied. When people saw me getting punched in the face out in Great Barrington and saw this guy wearing a liberal t-shirt hitting me,
And that happened recently, correct?
just happened on July 22nd, right? If that was someone with a Trump t-shirt hitting a black guy, it would have been on every major TV station. There would be vigils now, and Hollywood people would be coming in front of Donald Trump's house. But WHDH didn't cover this. They didn't even want to mention my name. The Boston Globe didn't cover this. Right? Think about it. Because they've created a narrative of who should be in government. Surely an MIT guy with 4 degrees who truly represents the spirit of America is not allowed on that platform because they want, I use the word scumbag, by the way, to describe Elizabeth Warren.
Appropriately.
And I, by the way, define that word as a waste engineering term. It is a scum that's on the top of the septic tank that you take off and you put into a bag. So
You're talking about yourself as being a bit of the beginning of a movement, which you hope
we
to be
need
able to.
an individual can, but at the right time, there's always been the question: do heroes create history? Does history create heroes?
Yeah.
I think what happens is the conditions have to be right. Donald Trump could not have done this 50 years ago, right? In fact, he tried, right, or 30 years ago. The timing has to be right. The material conditions have to be right. In some way, Marx got that right. Marx talked about the conditions have to be right for certain things to take
And
place.
you feel the conditions are.
Oh yeah, what's
very
happening?
right.
Yeah, I mean, look, in India, a guy called Modi won. He used to sell tea on the thing. He took out the Gandhis, who were for 70 years they ran India.
Yeah.
So you have East and West, the two country, one country which was my motherland, and the country that made me, America. 2 revolutions took place. Modi got 530 million votes. Unheard of. And the Gandhi family has been ruling since Nehru, then his daughter Indira, then their son, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's continued as a lineage.
Where does Modi come from?
Modi comes from Gujarat,
Gujarat.
and he was a tea seller,
Yeah.
tea wala. He sold tea on the streets. So we have a very interesting dynamic taking place in human history. I think people are tired. Even this woman Octavia who won, who's the reason she won was people are tired of the establishment. This guy, this 10-year politician, never even showed up. He never even campaigned, and I think people are awakening. I think we're living in an opportunity for that inflection point where we can go from water to steam.
I would love to see a lot of these politicians.
Well, that's why people need to vote for and support our campaign, because we are part of the tip of a new wave, and what better place to declare our independence than in Massachusetts. This is not a state of Republicans or Democrats. If anything, I'm a true independent, a true, in the spirit of the Lincoln Republican. If you look at the situation, you have Elizabeth Warren, you have the 3 others who are trying to vie it out. One of them voted, gave $250,000 to Bill Clinton, okay? The other guy has a Saudi lobbyist, voted for Joe Biden, endorsed Baker, and the third woman is claimed to fame. She ran the lottery. I mean, none of these people have ever built anything.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, why are they even being given any press? And I'm saying that
They want to become part of the club.
they want to become part of the club. And by the way, being in the Senate is a club, right?
It is.
You get lifetime membership to their spas,
It is.
treatments, everything.
Benefits galore. Larry, you have a question?
First, I just want to make sure you feel you're being fair to these other politicians, but just call them scum.
I think it's a right
And-
term. It's a technical term that we need to.
Could you describe?
Oh, like
that
I
a
don't
little
consider
bit
Rand
more?
Paul that. Rand Paul, Tom Massey, ophthalmologist. Donald Trump has actually been on construction sites, built stuff. We have this twinkles of, spurts of greatness occurring also. But all these other scum, as I call them, it's opportunity for people to learn truth versus lies, and that's what our campaign is exposing. I mean, if you look at someone who lied to, let me elaborate on what I mean by scum, okay? I didn't lie to get into MIT, okay? Elizabeth Warren went to not a great law school, okay? Even though I like Rutgers, great school, but it wasn't one that's on the top tier that you get in a professorship at Harvard.
Where did you go, to Rutgers?
She went to Rutgers. Rutgers, great, a lot of great people, but my point is,
Right.
she checked off she was Native American, and that's how she got in. Now, you can even expand, so she gets in by lying that she's a Native American. This is wrong on so many levels. First of all, lying. Second, take affirmative action. We can argue whether it was right or wrong, but it was a gain of the civil rights movement.
Right.
A lot of people lost their lives, in that political movement.
Yep.
And civil rights was a gain of that. She used that for her advantage.
Material-
That's racism.
Yep.
That's a definition
Not
of
to mention
racism.
the benefits, the
But that's
financial benefits.
right. But
that
that's
you-
racism. Racism
Yeah.
is using race
Yep.
for one's personal benefit.
Right.
It's not me calling you words, etc. In my view, that's ignorance.
Yeah.
Then after she gets into Harvard, what does she do?
That's an important difference, and hope we can get back to that. But go ahead.
By the way, once you get a professorship, you have a certain period of time to prove yourself and gain your eminence in that field. So Elizabeth Warren decides that she's going to be the eminent expert on bankruptcy out of Harvard. Well, how do you do that? You have to write papers. So let's say both you guys are writing papers, and one of you is up for tenure, or to be respected as the bankruptcy expert.
Right.
Not only do we look how many papers you published, but how many other people cited your papers. So
Wow.
if Frank over there is the godfather of bankruptcy, and he says, yes, Larry, his papers are amazing, and he cites his papers, and he's the anointed one. Well, so Elizabeth Warren, to get that anointment, in 2005 writes a paper on bankruptcy, asserting that 42% of small businesses failed because of high medical bills, e.g. they didn't have medical insurance. In 2009, she writes another paper, I believe in the American Journal of Medicine, which is amazing, asserting that 62% of businesses failed because they didn't have insurance or high medical bills. Those two papers became the theoretical foundation, the fake science, behind the Romney Care, Obamacare treatise. So what I'm saying is you have to understand, Trump has clearly pointed out fake news. I'm going to point out fake science. You see, behind fake news is fake science. Because journalists don't do journalism, they just read something, oh, blah, 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 professor at Harvard said this, cut and paste. Blah, 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 professor says Monsanto's foods are safe, cut and paste. Blah, 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 professor said we need medical insurance, cut and paste. That's all they do. They don't do any research. Mm-hmm. So Elizabeth Warren's, the reason I call her scumbag is, in that sense, she did a lot of scummy things there. Yeah. Because she created a fiction. 3 months ago, a professor at MIT, Kellogg's professor, another professor, reviewed Elizabeth Warren's work. How did she get this data? She did what's called surveys. It's like saying, hey, Larry, how'd you go out of business? Oh, I think I went out of business because I had high medical bills. It wasn't based on any concrete data. They went and did a reanalysis, and it's only 4%. Big difference between 62% and 4%. But those papers coming out of Harvard determine public policy because everyone cites those papers in their footnotes. You see how this works?
Yeah. Okay.
Remember, everyone in high school we learned, when you're writing a research paper, you have footnotes.
Yep.
We're assuming those footnotes are truthful.
Exactly.
Wikipedia, by the way, is based on a lot of falsification. Yeah. Wikipedia clearly says we're not about truth, we're about citations. So if I say Larry beats his dog every day, and I write it in some blog over here, I can go to Wikipedia under Larry's page and say, Larry Way beats his dog. Cite that. So we've created a society of citations which are based on referring to experts. In this case, those experts come out of Harvard University. Mm. And so what they say must be true because it has a big H on it. Mm. So that's one example, Larry.
And citations are not truth.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is we need to call out these people because I don't know what else to call them. Because what they do is so egregiously wrong to humanity, because one professor at Harvard can write some treatise that is so bogus that can affect 20, 30, 40 years.
It's primarily at Harvard, but not exclusively at Harvard.
No, it's not all the major. Look, when I was at MIT, I exposed MIT. You're right. There's no professor at MIT who will really expose Monsanto, or at Cornell. Even if you're a Nobel Prize guy and you go to Cornell and you say anything against Monsanto, you're done, right? So all of these, because what happened around the 70s was that tenure was these academic institutions were supposed to be places where we went to have freedom of speech and freedom of thought. Around that time, they started getting rid of the rabble-rousers, right? So after those 7 years, what you had was a robotic faculty. you don't make waves. When universities were where you went to make waves, right? It was
that's true.
where you could go and be shielded from attack. That's not what it is anymore. It's part of the military-industrial academic complex.
Wow.
Interesting.
But it's easy to
Great
solve.
big
One of the
club.
things with academics is they're very weak people because they're very insecure, like Hollywood celebrities, and I know this because I used to live out in Hollywood. The unique thing between Hollywood celebrities and academics is they know they got there not on truly merit, right? Except a few actors. Most of them got there because of being at the right place at the right time. There's very few actors who really went through nowadays most of the academics got through doing this process. There's a lot of great people who are not at these big academic institutions because of the nonsense they have to go through. A lot of great actors are, in small theaters somewhere because they don't want to sleep around. They're not willing to pay that enormous price. They have principles. So you'll find massive insecurity among these
I've
people.
often wondered about these people. A lot of them who write and write extremely well and are not from Harvard or MIT or any of the Eastern schools. They come from University of Wichita or they write well and their points are well taken. I've often wondered why they are not here. They're not part
Well,
of
what
the
I'm
club.
saying is we need to go back to the fundamentals.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, Larry.
Well, that's right. I guess I'd like you to try and do this. The average Massachusetts voter is just not going to accept the fact that their politicians that they've voted for are scum, are scumbags, that you've alluded to, that you've now called them. So how would you relate these feelings, not just feelings, I think you have some fact behind that. How would you relate that to the average voter?
Well, look, what's happened is when you lower the standards every year, lower and lower and lower and lower, you don't even know how low it's gotten. You know what I'm saying? It's like slowly being in a filthy place, you start getting used to it. If anyone ever had a really bad college roommate, and
You get used to it.
you get used to living in a mess. I mean, I never liked it, but I've seen people who were clean and they got worse and worse and worse and worse. So it's that kind of psychological phenomenon. So you keep lowering yourself. Oh, I guess it's okay he stole a little bit of money. I guess it's okay she lied. Well, she didn't really lie, did she? You see what I'm saying? Like when we're out on the street passing cards out, people have lowered their standards. They've forgotten the greatness of this country. They've forgotten why so many people want to come to this country. Because one of the things this country had was rule of law. That's why my parents left India. And the notion it was based on meritocracy. When you take away both those things and you keep lowering the standards that 30% of the admissions to Harvard can be legacy, that's okay, right? It's okay to let illegal immigration take place. Well, we have to call them sanctuary cities. That's what's happening. Yeah. Every year, we keep lowering the standards. We keep giving young kids awards and telling everyone's equal. So what we're not motivating is hard work, stick-to-itiveness, that it's okay to suffer a little bit.
Should be doing the opposite. Should be reaching up.
So we're lowering standards. In 1975 or 77, when I went to high school, in the 80s, or early, 78, 81, my chemistry teacher who held 3 jobs. He won, I think, one of the presidential awards as the best chemistry teacher. Man, this guy had 3 jobs. If the answer is 99.92 and you put 99.9, 10 points off. It was about precision because he knew if you put 99.92, it could blow up a refinery one day.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So we're hurting our people. So I tell all these people who want scum, you're going to create a generation of people, because that's who these politicians are. They reflect you. Remember, they're your representatives. How will your students, how will your children view you? So it is an opportunity for people to say, you know what, we deserve someone like Shiva, 4 degrees from MIT, 7 companies, busted, his butt, working hard, mowed lawns, right? Had jobs since he's 14 years old, studied, and is an everyday working class guy. Isn't that who we deserve? Why do we deserve a guy who's a failed sign salesman? Why do we deserve a woman who is a lawyer lobbyist? Why do we deserve someone who thinks her eminence is she ran the lottery? And another guy, who went to Harvard and who gave $300,000 to Bill Clinton?
You're talking about something that's close to the universal man, something that is an individual like yourself who is accomplished in so many different fields.
I'm talking about people who just work.
Pardon me?
I'm just talking
yeah,
about.
I know.
There's a lot of
and
my
that
friends.
Is, all of it is work. Every bit of it. Everything that you did was work.
Frank right there is an electrician. Okay.
Yeah.
I have great regard for him because he knows how to figure something out. Like if something's broken in your home, he can figure it out. Bring Elizabeth Warren in and tell her something's wrong with your engine, your lawnmower, your electricity. What can she actually fix? What can any of these politicians actually
Her
fix?
headdress.
Her headdress.
I don't
I'm
think
saying
she
we
has
need
that
people
skill, but
because these are systems problems. Governance, opioid addiction has a solution. We actually found a solution, but the swamp doesn't want to implement it. The guy that we found with the solution was jailed for 8 months because he was actually solving it.
Who is this?
Dr. Kishore, one of our volunteers.
Okay.
Here's a guy who helped 250,000 patients over a period of 20 years. His solution was you go in the home, you detox people in the home. He was helping people enormously. What is the solution for opioids? Methadone. Mitt Romney took, as when he was part of Bain, took a bunch of the companies, aggregated them for $750 million and flipped them for $1.8 billion. Methadone is not the solution to addiction. So there are solutions, and we've talked about it. You should have Dr. Kishore on your show. So here's a guy who fixed it, solved it, had a solution, only 50% recidivism versus 95, 98% recidivism. Martha Coakley went after him and threw him in jail for 8 months.
Oh my God.
So what I'm saying is there are solutions to many of our problems. Climate change, it's about lowering pollution. It's not about carbon tax. You want to lower pollution, it's through innovation. But as long as we have scumbag politicians, they don't want to solve anything because they don't know anything. The people that are writing their laws are people who've been there 20, 30 years. They tell them what to do, and the lobbyists tell them what to write.
Wow.
So politicians are basically front-end
Puppets.
well, they're puppets. They're cash register people. When you go to the, one of the convenience
checkout
stores,
counter yeah.
they're the convenience store guys. That's what they are.
and Dr.
Make sure
Shiva,
they get something out of everything.
Right.
if you don't mind me also saying that one of the trends, I think, really since the 70s is that it's okay, more increasingly okay, for politicians to not tell the truth, to say one thing and vote another way.
Yeah.
Do
it's-
one thing in the campaign, well, that's just normal. They're politicians. They got to win the race first before they can really let their feelings out. Didn't used to be that way.
Well, there's two things. One is that the end justifies the mean, which is a fascist notion of existence, right? That's part of fascism. And if you look at our campaign, we're the first ones on the ballot. No news media has carried that. Think about that. I've talked to many quote-unquote politicians, and all of them say, what do you mean you got all your signatures without paying for them? I go, yeah, totally grassroots. Everything we got was bottoms up. Bottoms up. We had volunteers across the state collecting signatures. We got close to 20,000 signatures. We submitted a portion of them. We're the first ones on the ballot. None of the news media has reported this. All the other campaigns either pay for it, they have their party infrastructure, or their friends. So I'm saying it's got to be bottoms-up campaign. It's got to be by the people, for the people. This whole way that the political campaigns are run is top-down. It's all top-down. You raise a lot of money. 95, 98% of it goes to your buddies in TV, radio, etc. And then that's called a campaign. I don't think you need anywhere near that much money if you're willing to work hard and go on the ground, and that's what we're doing. I'm saying it starts there. How they run their campaigns is all top-down. It's not bottoms-up.
Yeah.
I think we have a question.
Yeah, question from Nana Ziegler. Shiva, what would you do about George Soros and his liberal puppets?
Good question,
So the question is, what would I do about George Soros and his liberal puppets?
right?
I mean, it's a pretty general question, but I think the bigger issue is there is a set of people who, part of the deep state, the military-industrial academic complex, that's who Soros really represents.
Right.
And he's not the only one. There's a lot of them, but he represents that, who have infiltrated academia. They're the ones who support people like Elizabeth Warren and others on both the establishment parties. And the politicians, as the questioner said, are liberal puppets. The first thing we need to do is, number one, we need to handcuff these politicians. That's why I
Right.
think term limits
Yep.
are extremely important.
Exactly. I
Because
agree.
if you have term limits, in any engineering project,
His
in any
money
plumbing
would mean
project,
nothing.
well, if you have a deadline, you only know you have 6 years,
Yep.
you're going to go in there and get stuff done.
Exactly.
Because you know that's your legacy that you're leaving. Second thing is you're going to do what's called succession planning, which means you're going to also foster good other people,
Right.
young people. Right, so I think that the term limits are the first thing. The other thing is, when you say liberal puppets, we need to recognize a lot of these liberal puppets are coming out of academic institutions. We need to start jailing some academics for fraud. You see, we throw Wall Street traders in jail when they commit insider trading, but we have yet to throw an academic in jail who writes or falsifies a paper, gets it published, and that paper, like Warren did, becomes the thesis that's used for guiding public policy.
And is there something illegal about those types of papers that academics
It's completely
write?
illegal because these institutions are funded by federal monies. I mean, Harvard gets about $1 billion from federal funds, right? So our tax dollars are giving grants to these organizations, which then use those tax dollars to write supposedly these beautiful 12-point written paper, nice font, make it look good, big words, right, to obfuscate what's really going on. They get published in quote-unquote peer-reviewed journals, and then we're made to believe that's the truth. So that, I would argue that's even worse than a Wall Street guy doing insider trading, because he does it, it affects the market, right? These guys do it, it affects generations.
Generations, yep.
And I think that's the problem. I think the answer to that question would be the groundswell that it's starting to realize that politicians are not always being honest with us.
I have a better
Right,
answer.
right. Politicians are not being honest because
And we're
they
starting to
don't need
realize
to be.
that.
They don't need to be honest because they're just puppets. The puppetry is they are being controlled by a different set of people, and those set of people essentially are really smart, evil people who have a direction that they want to take it, and these politicians are essentially paid for. They want very stupid guys.
Ken Gordon.
Yeah. Elizabeth Warren isn't that intelligent. It
I
doesn't
was
take a
gonna
lot of.
say, with
It doesn't
regard
take
to-
a lot of
with
effort to get a law degree. By the way, it's
With
not
regard
that.
to
It doesn't require that
Mr.
much intelligence.
Soros, he's quite ill, I understand. So if you wait a little while, he may not be around.
But he's
to-
smart. You see, he has succession planning. He probably has 10 other people ready to take his place. Frank, you have another question?
Yes, the username Big Bacon Breakfast asks you, last Sunday WBZ Radio ran a story on midterm elections with huge Liz Warren soundbites. Why is the media ignoring your campaign?
So the question is, why is the media ignoring our campaign? Look, we are the campaign that's made this entire Warren thing. It was a foregone conclusion that Elizabeth Warren was going to win. That's why we call her running scared. So when they're afraid of you, they ignore you. And that's what they're doing. And the reason they're ignoring us is because they know I'm considered a triple threat. I'm good looking, I'm articulate, I'm smart. And that is what they don't want on this medium, because if people hear me, they get convinced, hey, where has this guy been? So the idea is to shield a diamond in the rough away from people. And I say this with all humility, because after a certain point, when you're 54 years old, you start recognizing what strengths you have and what weaknesses you have, and it's wrong that if you don't share your strengths with people. So Elizabeth Warren and me on a debate stage, it would be game, set, match. So part of what they're doing, the media doesn't want to give me visibility, because in order to get on the debate stage, there's a 15% rule. And everyone should listen to this carefully. That means the pollsters will do their polls, and you have to get 15% visibility rating. So if they call 100 people, and they say, hey, have you heard of Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai? At least 15 people, 15 out of 100, by the way, is 15%, have to say that they've heard of him. In the last poll they did, in the most recent WBUR poll, which is fascinating, is they asked every other candidate, have you heard of blah, have you heard of blah, have you heard of blah, but they did not ask, have you heard of Shiva? Because they know that my visibility rating is probably around 30, 40%. Because the real Indian, fake Indian slogan is like lightning in a bottle. We have people who have road warrior signs and magnetic signs. At Shiva for Senate, you can get these road warrior signs. It's taking off. They know I was the guy who stood on the free speech rally. And now the news with me getting punched in the face with my megaphone went all over the world as well as the country. So they want to shield the local media. The local media is in collusion with...
It's control.
It's control. Because they don't want a great candidate like myself. They want to lower the standards, right? They don't want to give people good food.
Is your name...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Frank?
Will you ever run for president? It would be a waste for you not to run after Trump.
Well, look, I wish I could run for president. Unfortunately, we have this rule in the United States that you have to be born in this country. I was born in India. But, it would be an honor to run for president. Unfortunately, I can't. But I support the president of the United States. Look, Donald Trump, people don't understand how smart this guy is. They have no idea. I know how smart he is because when you've been around the world, you can see how intelligent this person is to fight the establishment, to do everything he's doing. So and that's how the founders of this country were. These people were really smart people and really hardworking people who believed in meritocracy. And I think to your earlier question, Larry, is that when we keep lowering the standards, right, people get used to junk food. They get used to scum. And they think this is manna, or food from the gods. And the issue is we have to give people a higher standard. They deserve it. And that's what our election is about. People deserve high standards.
They're certainly not used to that, but I hope we can change that.
I think people want that. You
I
see,
do too.
I just went to a health conference out on the West Coast.
People love being lied to.
No. Here's the interesting thing. 70%, I have a lot, I'm an optimist. 70%, 70 million millennials, 20 million baby boomers right now. Those 70 million millennials want authenticity, they want truth. Many of them are going independent. And by the way, as I mentioned, 80% of Americans want organic food. Look, I'm out at the South Station distributing cards. We say Elizabeth Warren voted for Monsanto, and you would think that would only be a very highfalutin issue. We have poor black women who come to us and they say, thank you so much. I hate that company, Monsanto. Across the board, this issue of food is a trans-ideological issue. People are, the internet, in that sense, is helping people raise their standards. What mother wants to poison their kids? Elizabeth Warren poisoned our children by supporting Monsanto. So I'm saying there's certain issues that are so human. That's what our campaign's about, right? Why do we want race war? I hope we have some time to talk about race.
I would like you to do that. I want
Yeah.
to touch a little bit upon your vision for healthcare, but I really was hoping to have you talk about race and how to.
They're
what's
sort of
happening with it, and-
interrelated. But if you look at the race issue, if anyone goes to Gallup, if you guys go to Gallup.com, they do a poll every week
Right.
on what are the big issues that Americans care about. Number one has always been governance, which means clean government, getting rid of corruption. Number two has always been race. And what's happened for far too long in American history is that the establishment has manipulated Americans about race. They use the Democrats to create a bogus narrative about race, that race has to do with not using certain words, changing the names of buildings. It's ceremonial issues. And then the Republicans tell people not to talk about race, that if you even bring up race, that means you want to use it as an excuse, right? But here's the real issue. Racism needs to be discussed because racism is about pitting blacks against whites. It's about using race for your political and economic benefit. The last great person who brought this country together around that issue was Lincoln, right?
Lincoln, yeah.
Lincoln did, and I would argue that Kennedy was trying to do that, okay?
Yes.
He got it before and Bobby Kennedy was trying to before they were shot, okay? But here's the deal, and I'll give you my personal experience with this, in this election, right? When we went to the Boston Free Speech rally, people called me a white supremacist. Indian newspapers called me a Nazi. Yeah, think about this.
Indian newspapers?
Because they were convinced that I was among a bunch of Nazis. Because remember, that free speech rally took place right after Charlottesville. And then the Boston Globe called it that. On the other side, you have horrible people like Howie Carr who take advantage of poor whites. He's built his whole book career, pointing at poor black people in the city, right?
That's
So
true,
you have
yeah.
the so-called Republican right, which really isn't Republican, they're just wrong, but they call themselves right, pointing at blacks, and the Boston Globe points at the poor whites. When I was the first one to announce in this election cycle in February 2017, another candidate, Republican, announced after me. The Boston Globe carries 3 pictures. 2 of them hadn't even announced. My picture isn't there. So I tweeted out, racist Boston Globe doesn't want the darkie. It went viral on the internet. Luckily, I have a great Twitter following. The editor of the Boston Globe calls me and goes, why are you calling me a racist? I said, Jim, you put the 3 white guys and you left the black guy out. What do you want me to say? He goes, oh, my intern forgot your picture. When I went on the Howie Carr show, he puts a mugshot of me of a case that was outright dismissed, false claims, a woman had done this to other people, and tries to present me as a black guy who beats white women. See what I'm saying? Yet Charlie Baker's son, who assaulted a woman on an airplane, got shoved under the rug, no arrest, nothing. So what we have is 2 laws. We should have a We Too movement. And the We Too movement goes like this, which means we want the same yardstick for everyone, equal laws for everyone. Not one law for Charlie Baker's son, another law for me and everyone else out
Very
there.
definitely. Frank, do you have another question for us?
Yes, we have a question from @Moonlight Wishes, and they say, Dr. Shiva, will you be going more into the urban communities to get people off the Democrat plantation?
Yeah, I think we need to get people off the reservation and the plantation. I was just out in Springfield today. We'll be going to all the urban communities. It's something that's extremely important to us. So anyone listening out there, tell us where you want to come. Our campaign is bottoms up. We'll be driving around our bus and we'll say, if you're around, tell us where to come, and we'll literally take our bus over there, deliver signs, deliver lawn signs, etc. So the urban communities are extremely important because the average net worth, by the way, of a black person in Boston by the Federal Reserve is $8. $8. So simple thing, if you take all their assets, which means everything they own, subtracted from all the liabilities that they have, debt, $8 is an average net worth.
Wow.
And this is in Boston, 3 miles from Elizabeth Warren's home, her mansion. And now they don't even talk about a poor white person, right? That statistic they leave out conveniently, because you'll probably find their plight isn't that different. So we create, Massachusetts, by the way, if you talk to a lot of people of color and even other people come to this state, it's known as one of the most racist states.
Yes.
And
heard that,
and we're shielded here from
Yeah.
the fact that the liberal, what I call the white liberal racists, are the ones who control the narrative on racism.
Yep.
And that's why if you look at most of the inner cities, go to Lawrence, go to Roxbury, go to all of the inner cities, Springfield, these people aren't taken care of. But if you go to Kendall Square, you go to Harvard Square, Kendall Square is like a little black hole sucking all the energy. They have all the VCs there. A lot of people suck all the juice out of the rest of Massachusetts.
Tell me in 30 seconds, if you can, how do you get people off the plantation or out of the reservation?
Well, it's inspiration, number one.
Okay.
People need to see victories, They need to see victories occurring. They need to see the fact that a guy, when he gets punched in the face in Great Barrington, where all the white liberals are, calls out racism. And that, they need to see when the city of Cambridge tries to tell us that we need to remove the sign off our bus because it's violating a building code, only the real Indian can defeat the fake Indian. I take them to federal court and I win, right? People want a fighter. Look, I've done a lot of things, the invention of email, inventor scientist, all my MIT degrees, but that's not who I am. I'm a fighter. And I've had to fight since day one, be it in India, here. And that's what we need. People want fighters. So people want fighters who deliver, inspire people. Us exposing this guy who's a racist, and it's a great picture, liberal punching us in the megaphone. I mean, come on, it's classic. It'll finally one day it'll be in the Smithsonian or somewhere, right? But it's an amazing picture, right?
Yes.
And we exposed him, and he was arrested, and we're going to go after him. We expose the city of Cambridge, that we will not allow them to shut down our sign. We expose Charlie Baker and Marty Walsh. 40 of us versus 40,000. People need warriors. That's what we need. We don't need politicians because they're scum. We need warriors, people who will risk their lives, who will put their reputations on there because they love this country. That's who the people who created this country were. That's who the working people in this country are. They love this country, man. And that's what they want.
Are you finding more people are waking up?
If we get in front of people, it's game, set, match. That's why the media is so afraid of us. Why would the Boston Globe not have on the front page a guy being hit with, why would they not do that? Why would they purposely put the 3 white guys, the 3, frankly, Democrats in Republican clothing, right? And leave the dark-skinned Indian guy out, who was the first Republican candidate to announce? Why would any of the media not carry the fact that we're the first ones on the ballot? I mean, this is big news. This is historic news.
Absolutely. Frank, one last question.
Last question. Please explain the Trump phenomenon.
The Trump phenomenon is what I would
just
call,
talked
as a
about it.
scientist, it's a systems dynamic change. It's a disruption. When water goes to steam, it's at the right boiling temperature. Enough particles occur, and Trump was in the right moment at the right time, and he was a necessary disruption.
He's a fighter, too.
He's a fighter.
Yeah.
He doesn't care what people think about him.
Exactly.
I've never cared what people think about me, because if I did, we'd be still in India and I'd be picking coconut trees. By the way, that was the job of our cast, to pick coconut trees.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shiva.
Thank you.
We hope you get your message of enlightenment.
Shiva for Senate.
and
Everyone
reform-
listening, go and
reformation.
become a road warrior. I know everyone's working people, but you buy these 2 magnetic signs. They're $15, all made in America. Put them on your cars, drive around with them, and call out the fake Indian. Because only a real Indian can defeat the fake Indians.
And can we show the website?
Yep.
Maybe not. Want to announce what the website is?
Yeah, the website is Shiva, SHIVA,
There we go.
4 Senate.com. Shiva for Senate. Just go to the store and become a road warrior. Use your car as a political weapon. Everyone's busy, but this is really easy. You get these 2 beautiful magnetic signs, a bumper sticker, and tell people that you are tired of the scum.
Is
Okay.
Shiva a name that you
Shiva is a destroyer of ignorance. In this case, I wanted to be the destroyer of the deep state.
Okay,
That's
thank you,
the
everyone.
meaning of your
It's a
name?
destroyer of ignorance.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Pat.
you, everyone.
Thank you.